Welcome to this episode of Chapter Chats. My name is Denise Cardona, and we are joined with Dr. Chuck Hodel to discuss Chapter 11. We will be talking about distance education. Distance education is a very timely topic for these times. So, Chuck, what do you say we just get right on into this subject?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because a lot of people think this is something new, and it is not new. It is hundreds of years old. And the more we talk about it, I hope you see that. And as you read through the chapter, too, you're going to see some really interesting stuff in there about how this evolved into generations of distance learning. And I think once you get a sense of it and get it in the context, you realize what's happening now and how important it is.
From a historical point of view, what you just said is it's been around for many, many years. And that I would love to just hear a little bit more about that. And some of the listeners probably want to hear a little bit more about that too. What do you mean by that? How has distance education been around for a long time like that without the internet?
Yeah, well, let's define it first of all. And I think the easiest definition, and there's thousands literally, this is Chuck's definition, is that it's when you separate the learner from the source of the learning. So when the teacher is not in the same room or something like that. And if you think of it in that very abstract sense, then this goes back to the time when someone would write a note on a stone and pass it to someone else, and it would be directions on how to start a fire or where the animals are for the hunt. And if you look at it in very rudimentary and elemental ways, that was distance learning too. So what technology has done is just changed how we do it. It has not changed what it is. And what it is, the ability for people to learn without having that source of learning, whether it be a teacher or what have you, right in front of them within shouting distance or looking distance. And there's so many historical examples of this. I put some in this chapter that you should look at, but there are so many hundreds of thousands more. And really, once you get a sense for it, as I said, put it in the context, then you find out this isn't as difficult as maybe it seems on the surface because this concept has existed for a very long time. What we've done is found good ways to design using technology, whatever that technology might be.
It's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking back to a writing course that I took by mail. This was going back, I think I was maybe in high school and I wanted to be a writer. So I found this course in the back of some obscure magazine that said, for whatever, for $20, you have your own teacher. And so she would give me these assignments where I'd have to write an essay about a short story about two teenagers getting in trouble. And how and the conflict and all of that. And so I would write this painstakingly and I'd send it to her in the mail and I'd sit there and wait for like 8 weeks to get her feedback.
Right, you'd run down to the mailbox and see if you got an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did that same thing with the Cleveland Institute of Electronics, I think was the name of it. That's where I first got my electronics experience, went on to get an FCC license. And that was correspondence. This is an electron, this is a capacitor. This started with very basic things, but it was all mail. And here's lesson 1, send it back. Here's lesson 2. Okay, we're getting to lesson 5. You're not going to build something. So I build some useless piece of equipment and solder away on it or do whatever. And I think everybody like you and I have had the experience of learning remotely like that. And it sets this whole framework and the foundation for how to learn doing this electronically and whatever the latest state of the market is with these things.
Absolutely. It speaks to the person who likes to be instantly gratified because obviously mail-in takes a long time. So this has really revved up the engine.
This is not a mail generation. Snail mail is not going to work. Although I can assure you that it's still going on. There are still courses that are being distributed the same way they were 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, what are the key distinguishing features of each of the 4 generations of distance learning that you discussed in this book?
Well, as you look at it in the book, I think the one thing you want to walk away with is that this thing has platformed on top of something else, platformed on top of that. It is scaffolded through, just like we talked many times in learning about scaffolding. So of these generations of distance learning. So you start with this notion of mail it or hand delivered or something and you send it back. And in the 4th generation, we're talking about social media and other instant types of instructional tools. So we go from manual to an advanced form of manual where we look at television and radio. Then we get into the internet, and then we get into social media and digital. And all of these are important distinctions when you look at this because it really helps you determine how you're going to deliver something. And we still have populations that are in that first generation. We still have populations in the second generation. I would imagine there are public television stations now that still do sunrise semester. And you watch at 5:30 in the morning, and if you watch long enough, you get a certificate of completion or whatever happens. And then the internet, we're all distance learning now. We're doing what we do there. And the next state, and as I've said other times in different videos, is I believe that we're at the point now where I could deliver a course in Twitter or Snapchat or, God help us, TikTok. Although I won't dance. I promise you I will not dance. So I think as you look at this, what's happened in our society and in our learning is we have adapted to what comes forward. So whatever vacuum is created by a new thing, in this case technology, we have found a way as designers to design with it. And I think that's what's so cool. If you're an instructional designer today, there is nothing you cannot do. There's no technology that you can't design with. And I think that this just brings that to home as you look at the generations. Nothing has changed except everything.
Right. Well, have you given any thought to virtual reality in terms of
Yeah,
teaching?
oh, a lot of it.
God,
Yeah.
that's going to
In
be
fact,
amazing.
well, it's actually, I've been involved peripherally in some of those things. So I was associated at a distance from weapons of mass destruction training, which the firefighters and other folks put together. And there was a lot of talk at that point about doing that. So placing people in dangerous situations without them being dangerous. And there's so many different options on that and ways to do it. There's some that are believable. There's some that aren't. You can get the $5 app on the phone and these little head sets that you put over your eyes, and you can go over the falls or take a balloon ride or whatever. And I think as this evolves, and in some places it's evolved to the point where think about simulators for ships captains or airline pilots or anybody else. It's there. It's just how far do you want to take it and how real do you want to make it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's talk about what a MOOC is, or better known as a massive open online course. And what is it, and what are the
Yeah.
key components?
Well, essentially, it's a course that you watch remotely. So whether you do it on a computer, whether you do it on YouTube, I think there's some on YouTube. Um, However you want to do it, there's probably tens of thousands of them out there now. And it's just a distributive system of taking classes, putting them in video in some format, and then giving people an opportunity to watch them. And there's some real issues with them. I know people love them. I know people are not as impressed with them as others. I'm not particularly impressed with them. But I think they do provide something for some people. And if it works for you or works for a learner, then that's all we care about. But some of the things that people don't realize are that it's almost impossible to get any completion or evaluation of mastery with these. And you can get a certificate that says you showed up and those kind of things. But to get credits for it means you have to have some substantive form of mastery. So if you take one of these at Harvard or University of Pennsylvania or wherever you might see one in a topic that interests you, I would say from a design perspective, I always looked at how we evaluate these things. And I'm not a big believer in continuing education units unless they're for professional services like medicine or law or accounting or something else. That's wholly legitimate, and that's the way they do their in service. But you have to think about, okay, if all you're going to do is provide continuing education units, which they usually charge you for, from an instructional design perspective, it really doesn't do much. All you've said is that this person attended. There's no form of mastery evaluation. So designers, be cautious with these wide distribution systems, because if your idea is to simply distribute a course or a program or something else, that's great. Go for it. This is what you can do. If you're going to do something else, then you have to think about what are the evaluation issues with this? How can I legitimize this for people that want credit or something beyond just the experience of doing that? And what they found, and I just looked this up before we got on, is the completion rate for these is between 5 and 10%,
Wow.
which means that, you know, and the statistics on the average online course completion are well over 30%. My experience has been almost 100%, but that's in 4 credit courses. So you have to look at it and say, okay, if you're trying to promote your academic institution or your organization or something else, and you put this stuff out there, tremendous, go for it. There's nothing wrong. I support you as far as I can with that, because I think any education is good education. But from a design perspective, as an instructional designer, you've got to go deeper. And as we always say in this series and in others, you have to go and dig and dig and dig. And your final question is going to be, how do I evaluate this for mastery if I'm going to provide any kind of accreditation?
Yeah, it reminds me of courses that I've taken, and I've gone like 5 to 10% of completion myself.
Yeah, I mean, you're a perfect example, right?
Specifically on platforms. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the platform name, so I won't,
I
just in
wouldn't.
case. All right. But platforms that cater to learning through just course modules without actual certification, but more so, they do bring you through. I've been through several that are very helpful that I've actually completed the whole
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
and it's because it's stuff
Some are
that
tremendous.
right, like I want to learn how to use Adobe Premiere better. Well,
Sure.
that's a perfect example of maybe one that is well suited for that. I'm not looking for accreditation or anything like that. I just want to be able to do my job better, and so
Yeah.
it's more for like personal professional type development on my own accord, and so that's where the motivation is high. So of course I'm going to complete that, but there have been certain courses where I'm like, yeah, this isn't really for me. I might have even paid for it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
nah, that's not really what I'm looking for. It's kind of a waste.
But I think what that brings to mind here is informal education. And we haven't talked about informal education. Um, Here might be a good spot to bring it up a little bit. Is the reason YouTube is so popular is because I don't have to pay anything extra. I can watch as much as I want. I can turn it off and move on. And how many times, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but let's say if I'm having trouble with a piece of equipment or something that I don't understand about plumbing, which is everything, or whatever it might be. So I get on YouTube and say, okay, how do I fix a leaking faucet? And 400,000 YouTube videos will pop up. Hopefully, the highest ranked ones, but not always. There's the ones with two view. And it's a guy with a GoPro in his head. He's probably used duct tape to put it on there, which is cool. I mean, I love what people do on YouTube.
Resourceful.
Obviously, we're on YouTube, so we must be promoting
Yeah,
it.
we are.
But that's informal education. And what has happened is a maturation of informal education. So before you might go to the library or ask your neighbor or your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, your brother-in-law, or somebody, so I could do that, and then it costs you twice as much to fix it after they help. But so the whole notion, and I think that's why MOOCs are popular. I think why all these things are popular is I don't have to have a formal relationship with anybody to get on there and learn how to fix a faucet. And
Absolutely.
I think this tells us a lot about instructional design because we need to be able to develop product that gets right to the point. If you're trying to entertain people, that's one thing, and it will have success in different ways. If you're trying to educate, it still takes a good instructional design to be able to do that, whether it's for credit or informal or what have you.
Absolutely. Yes, I've spent a lot of time on YouTube researching things. As a matter of fact, recently I've been searching like crazy for why do I hear a creaky door down in my basement when nobody's down there opening the creaky door, and there are no creaky doors. So it's
I
all
think that falls under the supernatural section.
no, it's a plumbing issue, and so and now it's time to call my father, who's a plumber up
Yeah.
in New England.
Well,
But he's
my new friend, your father, absolutely.
that's correct.
Yes.
I figure I try YouTube first so that I can say, Dad, guess what? I
Yeah.
figured this out. I understand this.
And your dad will tell you, as every plumber I've ever worked with, they just love it when somebody tries it themselves because the bill is twice as high. So if I were you,
Absolutely.
I would call Dad immediately and just be done with this.
Oh gosh. So let's talk about when designing for distance learning and using ADDIE.
Mhm.
What are some of the challenges that a designer might come across with each of the elements of ADDIE?
Well, I think analysis and design are pretty much what they are. They don't care what you're doing. They're just gathering information. And when you're in analysis, just make sure you look at your population as it relates to the technology you're going to use. So if you're in distance, do you have people that have the technology? Are they skilled in the technology the level we need them to be? Just kind of obvious things. And you'll find that in the chapter analysis in the text. Design is design. You're just putting stuff together. So it really doesn't change there. When you get to development, now this is where it gets interesting because you're going to have to look at, okay, what's the modality? Am I putting this in a product that I can distribute through the internet? Am I putting in some product like ours where it's going to be on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera? So you may get into coding, you may get into learning software packages or have someone that knows these packages, so Articulate or whatever you're using. I mean, we go back to the basics of the first Apple video software, and it confused us, and now people would just laugh at how simple it is. But the notion of it being different than just doing classroom training is significant here. And this is where you get into 20, 30, 40 time ratios of how much time you spend on a course is when you look at what happens here, what you've designed, and now what you have to develop. Mm-hmm. So in implementation, you're still implementing. You still have to figure out, whether something's working. I would definitely do a pilot. There are many pilots when you're in development, but implementation, put it out there, check it, make sure it works. And evaluation, this is where it gets tricky again, because if you're doing something for academic credit, regional accreditors are going to demand that you have some control over the evaluation. So if you cannot certify or find a valid way to assure that people are doing their own work and other things related to that, then you have to ask yourself, do I have a legitimate product? And I've struggled with this, and I think every designer struggles with this. So at some point, for people that are requiring certification, you may get in a situation where they have to show up physically somewhere. The recent health issues have changed that significantly. But there are software products that will come and reside on their computers, and it blocks everything but what you're doing with them in evaluation. So there's a camera on them. There's all kind of other things that happen, and I'm sure 6 months from now it'll be 10 times more sophisticated. The point being for design that there are ways to assure that the person supposedly providing the product or the skill or what have you is being observed and measured, that there is legitimacy to that. Mm-hmm. Not all stuff online and not all stuff at a distance cares or it makes any difference. But I can assure you the more sophisticated and the higher order stuff, you're going to have a way to come up with evaluation that's legitimate.
Okay. And the final question that I have for you is packet learning. What is it?
Packet learning. Well, packet learning is this whole notion that we're going from this one teacher talking to one classroom to one teacher talking to 10,000 classrooms or what have you, and the amount of information that can be shared. So we've gone from audio, talking, and seeing a teacher to now we are getting endless reams of information digitally. And what has allowed this all to take place is what I call packet learning. Others call it micro learning. There's lots of different terms here, but it goes back to packet radio technology. And this is the notion that this is why cell phones work. This is why you have light guide telephone cables and data cables. So instead of having one pair of copper that you have one conversation on, you now have different ways to transmit data that's not analog, it's digital. So you can take every little section of information and pack it in front of behind another section. And in the text, you're going to see some information there that'll show you how this works in a diagram. But the notion is we've now gone from the point of, okay, it's just one thing going to another thing, to it's one thing going to 1,000 other things all at the same time. Can you imagine 1,000 teachers in a classroom talking at the same time? I've taken classes where I probably would have gotten more out of it, but nonetheless, the whole notion of this digitizing and packetizing of education. So that's what your cell phone is. That's why Twitter works. That's why any of these programs work. And to put it, I think, in a good example for you, if you remember fax machines, and they're still fax machines, but a fax machine was one telephone number, right? So that was
Absolutely.
your
And
fax number.
it would hurt your ear if you
It hurt your
if
ear
you
when you had
dialed
to do all that.
somebody's fax machine instead of their phone
But it was
number.
one fax machine with one phone number,
Yes.
and that was analog for the most
Yes.
part.
Hmm.
Now you could have a million fax machines on one pair. And when you can do that with technology for those kind of things, then imagine what you can do with it for learning and from an instructional design perspective. So the takeaway, I think, in this chapter, what I would try to get across to all of you as students and people watching this, is this notion of you need to now think in smaller chunks. Don't think in an hour chunk. Don't think of a half-hour chunk. Don't think of a 5-minute chunk. Think of a 5-second chunk or a 10-second chunk. And each objective you write is as big as the chunk is going to be. And depending on your content and what you're doing, these chunks could be extremely small.
Wow.
And what this allows you to do then is to package this digitally in so many different ways. You can make it on demand. A learner is working through a course and they just want to start it. So they'll do 1 or 2 or 3 of these packets and they'll get feedback that they're okay. Then they'll pass through. It's machine learning in a digital world. So it's endless, and 5-10 years from now, this conversation will sound antiquated because it'll be on to the next level of this packetization and digitalization. But for designers, it's a notion of you need to break stuff up. So call it micro-learning, call it whatever you want. It's breaking the stuff up into chunks in the smallest discernible chunk of learning.
Oh, I love that. That actually really excites me because that's how my brain works. That's how I think a lot of our brains work is chunking things down into digestible steps so that you can get
Yeah,
through it and feel accomplished in the small steps because they do eventually add up to, a journey. And
it is.
yeah, when you look back and you look at how far you came, taking those small chunks, it's really impressive. So,
And it's really good for scaffolding learning too. If you watch our other videos and we talk about scaffolding learning, building one learning on the top of another, you can do unlimited scaffolding in a minute if you break it down small enough.
well, this has been a very insightful conversation, as it always is. These chapter chats are very enlightening. And I hope that our viewers feel the same way, that you got a lot out of this particular chapter chat. Thank you very much for being here with us, and we hope to catch you next time when we discuss Chapter 12. Take care.